What you are about to see is a real-life story. The accounts have gone into great detail to give each side's version of this an exclusive one, we understand. One of the most talked about.
All right. Hey guys, welcome to PiFi.
Man, that tune is so groovy.
You know, both my sons are professional musicians, and they're always helping me out. And Alex, my youngest son, made that one for me. I told him I wanted the, Barrett my oldest son made the intro for my construction videos and all that. And my youngest son is more into the, hipper music. So I said, I want a hip intro for the PiFi show. And he's just like, bam, like 30 minutes. Here you go, Dad.
That's like, so groovy. So my daughter's taking up music. She just got into it. She wants to play cello. Cello's got a tune. I played I don't know if you've ever seen two cellos before. Two guys.
I think I have. Yeah.
The cello played Thunderstruck. Like watch, just Google two cellos Thunderstruck. I'm just ridiculous, man. It's awesome.
I have actually seen that. Yeah. I had to go get cool. The comments turned on YouTube. So, how are you guys doing?
Great, man. Great.
It's good to see both of you. How are you doing, Alexei? Thanks for coming.
I am doing great. Thank you for having me.
I did want to say right quick, and both of you get a new mug. You get the new PiFi mug and a t-shirt. That's going to be a new tradition I'm starting. I'm going to give
I've been using this one for like 2 years now.
I'm going to give the guests the new shirt and a mug from now. And if anybody wants to help support the show, they can go to PiFi, the PiFiShow.com and buy one to help me pay for them for Alexei and Brad.
Did you get a new website then? PiFi.com?
The PiFiShow.com. Yeah.
PiFiShow.com.
Nice.
Yeah. Let me bring since you mentioned it, I'll bring it up just for 1 second if it's okay.
Yes.
And it's not much, I use Joomla. It's a content management system for websites. So I'm not like a web developer. I can just do the basic stuff. So, but it has the schedule over here on the right and the show archive. I don't have them all in here yet, but there's like 100 of them. Eventually I'll get them on there. And you can go here if you want to support the show and buy a t-shirt, a mug.
Man, that's awesome.
Do you have Most Wanted on there?
Some of my
Most Wanted?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for reminding me. The PiFi Most Wanted is a list of people. And look, I apprehended Tim Burchett.
Nice.
He was on there. I want Sabina Hassenfelder. She's already told me probably not. I have a contact for Brandon. Brandon says he might come on in November. And then Ramses Swami. But I would like to have him. I think he's an interesting guy. So anyway.
Presidential candidate.
What's that?
He's running for president?
Yeah. So I know it's most like I'm shooting for
no, man, shoot for the stars.
I got high.
What are they gonna do?
Yeah, they're just gonna say no or whatever. Thanks again for coming. I thought if you wanted to, we could go over your most recent work.
Oh, yeah, sure.
First, I thought it would be fun just to get this off my chest. I would if both of you could just say real or fake based on on the Peruvian alien babies. What is your take on that? I can say I think they're fake. If you want me to just kind of go first, what do you think, Brad?
No, it's maybe they're fake, but the reason to be fake has, in my opinion, has got nothing to what people are talking about. Like when they talk about, it's like a llama. Man, I like a llama to me, but I'm not an expert. But it'd be really easy to see if it was or not. All you'd have to do, take like a little DNA sample, and then take a DNA sample out of the finger and sample out of the knee and a DNA sample out of the bottom of the foot. And then if they all come out the same, then guess what? It ain't a llama. It's like that's a llama finger, and there's a lot of ways that I think it would be very easy to show that it's a llama. Look, here's the llama DNA. So
I haven't heard the llama thing. I just I've heard all
that's
kinds
a
of
llama skull, and they think this guy Franken all together and that would be so easy. That would be really hard to do, but if all it would take would be somebody to just take DNA samples, like you'd be an idiot if you thought you knew people in the 21st century by doing that. I don't know if it's real. I don't know. The reasons that they say they think are stupid, like it would be so easy to tell, to essentially deep it. And I feel like here's what really me, right? Like, what do you hear all the time? Pseudo skeptics and skeptics and everything. Like, all you have are these grainy, like, where's your high picture? I want to see data. That's what you hear him say all the time, right? And it's like, well, okay, here's an alien, like better than any picture, more high definition than anything else. So here you have something that you can sink your science. You keep saying you want data, and the people who are saying all you have is any pictures, all you have that, hey, give people that I'm gonna. They're just saying, oh, it's full of crap. This guy's a salesman, and so when they call and they call for more than grainy photos, you give them a body. You want to test it. They don't want up to a million different labs and say, hey, that it's wrong. They just want you to ignore
they can provide some bone and tissue samples just to just a few, like give a sample to Eric Weinstein or Gary Nolan or someone, or Bernardo Kastrup or somebody.
Say, hey, we'll give it to. Let's democratize the testing. So, get lab across the world that's gonna, do it at a university. You want to do it? Hey, just like get a little piece. I mean, it's not like
that. The reason I'm leaning towards it not being real is the fact that there's a resistance to that. There should be this openness. They should be the first people to say, look, I need to get this out as soon as possible. Right? I need to get this out to the world. But there's a resistance to doing that. So that's what I'm basing anytime I see anybody resisting, cooperation for, the scientific method, then I'm gonna, I don't have any other choice but to be skeptical. What do you think, Alexei?
I'm not impressed. Was that a short answer?
Yeah, I love this. Yeah. Again.
Okay, so I can be impressed. I can act impressed and make correlations, though. So the one thing that struck out as making the mummies fake was the fact that their hip bones didn't even work. Like the anatomical structure of their hip bones going into the hip, the leg going into the hip doesn't even move. But now what did we hear about in Peru? These guys don't really even walk around. They float around and like levitate around. That's where the whole thing's kind of silly to me in a way. And it's not that I'm a believer or not a believer. I know there's extraterrestrials. Like, I know that it's a big universe. Whether or not that's a legitimate thing, maybe. It's so far advanced, I don't understand its anatomy. But then at the same time, what's the chest plate about? Well, that reminds me of like binding, a type of binding, right? If you wanted to change the rib cage structure of a baby from the moment it was born, you might attach something to its ribs and not allow it to grow, or force it to grow in a certain way. Kind of like people do head binding, they do foot binding. Maybe they did some type of rib binding. But at the same time, it's not that impressive to me, right? It's not like definitive proof in my mind.
It's just like we were talking about off the air. To me, it's not my ideal. It wasn't how I imagined disclosure would be, and So you know what I mean? So I just feel like it was it's almost like a, hey, now's a good time to bring out our alien babies, and it's almost like a timing thing, right? Where how long have they had these things, and why didn't they bring them out before? Why haven't they allowed other people to test them? That kind of stuff.
Well, aren't these the same ones that Gaia had like 5 years ago, or no? Am
I think
mistaken?
so. That's my problem, is that I don't know, and I think, and to see the reaction from other people. Um, like what was the fellow? Was it Graves? Was it Graves that was there at the
Yeah.
conference where they were? And he certainly wasn't happy with the idea. He wasn't impressed either, and he was there. So
Well, it turns it around from being like real data, real stuff, to potentially. I mean, maybe it is a real mummy. I don't know. That's right. I don't know. But it went from being military data, grade data, to like, here's this mummy that was debunked 5 years ago. But I don't know.
So Brad, how are you doing now? Let's test your connection.
How do I
now.
sound?
You sound good. I just want people to be able to hear. I hope that wasn't too inconvenient.
Yeah. No. It's
especially
fine.
when we start talking about your deal. I want people to be able to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah. I mean, I think, again, if I had something in my possession like that, the first thing I would want to do, if I wanted to be seen as legitimate, is I would just take one of the legs. I would take my miter saw and I would cut it into 3 or 4 pieces, and I would send it out to different labs across the country. And I might even take a poll as to who I should send it to. But I would certainly send it to someone who's in this theater, who's in the genre, who's respected. Like I know Eric Weinstein's not a lab technician, but he could certainly oversee testing. Or Gary Nolan could certainly do it. Or I don't know. Who would you think? That's a good question. Who would you trust, Brad, to test the bone tissue, the bone structure, and the?
I would more credible if wanted it. Any lab totally it. So, university, school, labs, you can have a piece of them. Give them different pieces, diagram from where all the pieces came from. Let them carbon. Let them do DNA testing. What I would find it more credible. I would find it most credible if the testing was democratized. Everybody test it. That is what would, in my mind, because you can't take that. You know what I mean? Everybody in the world getting a chance. I think that's how. That's how.
The problem is kind of like what you described earlier, though. There will be some people who will say it's alien no matter what, right? So you have to kind of have some standards. I think. I don't think just you send it out to everybody. I think it would have to be like it would almost be better if it was a blind test where you sent it to a lab and didn't tell them what it was and just had them do the DNA testing. And I had my DNA tested for this CGI genetics company or something. They sent me back information about. They traced my DNA all the way back to the Garden of Eden.
Awesome.
And they didn't know who it was. If you send it to a company like that and you didn't tell them what it was, then you're going to get back results that are not biased in any way. Hopefully.
Yeah, you could do experiments like that. I mean, you could do that. You could do that in parallel. You know what I mean? Doing one is just as good as both, Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea. More people involved I think that's good. I think the democratization of information is the way to go.
Well, I think if you were to go to scientists in the UFO field, it would only give skeptics more of a reason to say it's fake. So to find people that aren't even in the field, have no knowledge of what it is, say, what's this, is the way to go.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting to by suggesting the blind testing, or what would that be? Is that blind testing? What's the term for what I'm suggesting? Is it?
I think it's just typical scientific analysis. You know, that it's not necessarily. Well, I mean, you could call it the double-blind kind of thing.
Yeah,
but I
where
don't think
the
that
person
really-
doing the testing he doesn't have knowledge of the source of the material. Yeah.
Yeah, and for carbon dating, right? This is a 1,000-year-old alien. Carbon date it to say, carbon date this. You know. Yeah.
Oh, how old is this paper mache? Oh, I'm just kidding. But
How old is this llama skull?
how old is this llama skull? I haven't heard that. That's amazing. I haven't heard the llama thing. That's pretty.
Oh,
funny.
that's the consensus debunkers. Seems like
It's a
Wow.
llama skull turned around with the front of it cut off, basically.
Should I be happy that I'm not in that circle of debunkers
Yeah,
to know
dude,
to have heard it?
Yeah, it's horrible. It's tedious.
Well, yeah, I think if you're going to be a true skeptic, you just have to be honest and say, I don't know what it. I have no idea what it is. How could we possibly know without testing it? Right.
Well, half the videos I've seen have shown it to be like a mummy. The other half show it to be a cake. So I really don't know what to believe.
I thought when I first saw it, it looked like Coca cake. You know, that's a good way to.
It looks like
for,
ET.
For the cartels to send drugs into the United States or something.
The mule.
Stuff it full of cocaine.
It's a drug.
Yeah. Huh. So anyway, I've been kind of taking a lot harder approach to it until I see real evidence. But people call me a skeptic. I'm not. I don't know what. I think there's plenty of life in the universe. I just don't think that's it. So
yeah, I don't
excuse
know.
me.
I don't know either.
Well, that thing's not flying around the UFOs that we're seeing nowadays. That thing's 1,000 years old and mummified.
I mean, it's funny, being a contractor and having all these tools. I mean, I would love to take my drill press and drill a hole in the leg bone, or you know what I mean. I would do the destructive testing. I would do, especially if I had two of them. One of them would be toast. Okay, one of them would be in fine powder form by the time I got through with it. and I think that's what has to happen. Especially now, here's the thing. Let me just say this before I forget, okay? In the plane that there are eggs inside, that would be the first place I drilled, okay? That would be, I would take my chop saw, my miter saw, I would chop it off right above the eggs and right below the eggs, and I would empty out the eggs and determine the contents of the eggs. And I would do it live on this show. What were you going to say, Brad? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you talked about non-destructive. I did some in grad school and figured out how to destructively test lumber. I'll tell you about it, but you'll like it as a con. It's amazing. Because we used to bust lumber to see how strong it was. Like you
got
a statistically relevant sample. We won't need to do that anymore.
I remember when I was first asked to, I had an engineer friend who was like 80 years old, and he asked me to draw some trusses for him. And I went and did some research, and there was these tests that we did for like 30 or 40 years straight, where they had this huge warehouse, and they built these trusses, and they used all these different forms of connection, like the gussets with plywood gussets, metal gussets. They had all these different, nailing patterns, and they put real live loads on them, right? And we're talking like 30-year tests or something. It was awesome. This is when I was trying to help the Chief Don. Oh, this is too long of a story, but I was helping Chief Don. He was in an active base in Africa, and he was asking me to help him design some trusses for some temporary barracks. So I said, I can't help him unless I know a little bit about how, I mean, I knew how I had built trusses, but when you start, you're an engineer, Brad, you can't start doing that kind of structural stuff for other people, without being qualified.
Sure. You just throw the code at them,
Well, that's the thing about the code. It doesn't get into engineering, right? It just,
it just
30
inches on. No.
Yeah, it says,
His
it also, requires, pre-engineering, right? So, here's a question. What is it? They've already been tested: llama skulls, chicken bones, and paper mache. Who did the testing? 75 YBA. They've already been tested. I haven't seen that. Have you seen that, Brad? You told me about the llama thing.
No, I haven't seen it. The only thing the scientific back for that piece was I saw the article. I read the it was a CT scan, and it essentially concluded CT scan, and it concluded that it was like a llama, and the shape of a bone was like a human something. I mean, it's nonsense. Like, it needs to be legit tested, in my opinion. At least what the article that I saw was BS. Maybe there's other stuff I haven't seen. So
now you do have to be careful, because there's another fella who basically built his own skeleton to mimic. Well, okay, it was an X-rayed version of a reconstructed, and he was showing the hip bones out of alignment, and he showed the femur upside down on one arm. In other words, he was debunking. He was deep faking the debunking part, right? He faked his version of the skeleton to prove it was wrong. So you get it from both sides, right?
And the thing is, like, 1,000 years old allegedly, and mummies, like, they get brittle and shrink and right. So I mean, like, that's just kind of like, you're gonna take a picture. Look, that's a llama head. I don't know. I mean, what I want to see, what I would believe is, if they democratized it, if they sent it, and even like a testing, like you talked about, but let's do some science. Let's not just like, take an X-ray and go, oh, it's a llama. You know what I mean? It just seems silly to me. But it's just my opinion, and I'm anybody else's. I like them just the way they. But see some science done.
I don't know. Llamas and alpaca, like, they kind of pointy skulls.
Well, you break off the front and turn it around, and now the back of the llama skull has the eye sockets. It's from what I saw. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying that's what I saw as far as the debunk.
Yeah.
It's weird. Well, let's get into your thing, Brad. This is why we're here.
Sure. Yeah.
What I was going to ask you to do is to do like a layman's version, because
totally
a lot of people are like me. They're not formally trained in quantum physics.
Really, yeah, that's perfect. So I'll tell you, in 2020, that was when the Navy, when I saw the Navy say those, green triangles, these UFOs and stuff, that they were legit. They were legit UFOs. And I thought for sure that, I didn't even think those were real until 2021. And so I was like, and then my brain kind of like, I'm what you call a panic. Like, I like think and spin about when I get sort of, triggered or what have you. And so you would crush your ship. If your ship took off like a bullet, instantaneous velocity, you would crush your ship just from the inertia that it generates when it takes off like that. The same as you would crush it if it hit a brick wall and instantly stopped. What I realized was, no matter what happens, if it does that, it must be massless. It has to be mass, so that force acceleration, and force equals mass times deceleration when it stops. And so the rate of acceleration, that you mass times, meters per second, or whatever the rate that it or decelerates at. So the only way for a craft and a pilot inside of it to survive that kind of force is to be, because force times mass, which is zero, acceleration means you could have infinite acceleration, but if you have no mass, you experience no force.
How do you get and if you don't mind, like periodically, I'll interrupt
Sure.
you because I'm going to ask questions that I think a layperson would ask.
Sure.
If it's massless, how do we see these shapes like saucers and cubes and spheres? And it seems like if it was massless, it would just be like plasma or just light, a ball of light. Uh, how do we get the appearance of mass without it being mass?
Yep. Well, okay.
Oh shoot, we lost you for real that time. I broke the internet with that question. What do you think, Alexei? Take over for Brad.
Well, him and I have different theories and stuff. I don't disagree with anything he says. I agree with everything he's saying. But at the same time, I also think of warp bubbles.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That would explain.
But if you look at Brad's work, he uses the Faraday cage to create the looping magnetic field, which could also be that same warp bubble effect.
Are you back?
Hey, sorry, man. You got this windstorm, so it's kind of messing things up.
I'm sorry about that. Picked a bad night, didn't I? Sorry.
No, hey, sorry. I'm messing up your show. So, but I mean, anyway. So at the end of the day, what mass is sort of just weight. So when I say massless, just sort of think weightless. Doesn't mean it's not there. It just means it doesn't weigh anything.
Okay.
I mean,
all right.
So if force equals mass times acceleration, right? That's Newton's law. So mass has to be zero if it wants to take off or something like that. So the next step in my mind was, okay, it's got to be massless. So what gives matter mass? And so if go ahead and play the first video that I told you, the one about from PBS Spacetime.
Let's see.
Dr. O'Dowd.
There's a lot. Is that pretty much at the beginning of the?
Yeah, it's the beginning one. And started 2 minutes.
The thing about this is that you have to periodically pause it and make comment about it. So
for sure.
I have a question about the evolution part. Because something is revolving or spinning, I don't know how you can equate that to evolving. What does it mean?
Evolve just means change. I think in that context, it just means change over time. Like it could be left, and then it could be right, and then it could be left. You know what I mean?
He doesn't mean it doesn't change form. It just
right. Yeah. It just changes. And what we're going to see when he's going to talk about the difference between left and right is that there's something called weak hypercharge, and when he goes, and it only appears on the left-handed electron. But that weak hypercharge is what tells us that it's in contact with the Higgs field, because the Higgs field, and he'll go and say this, is an infinite sink and source of that weak hypercharge. So it's the left-handed electron that's stuck to the Higgs field. That's what we're going to find. And he's going to say that the Higgs field is what gives matter mass.
Doesn't the Higgs boson give them mass? Isn't that kind of the point?
So in quantum field theory, right, he just talked about quantum fields. Like there's like a photon field, and a little vibration in that field is the particle that's the photon. And so the Higgs field, to the extent that the Higgs field gives mass and a force, mathematically you can say that a boson, a Higgs boson, is an excitation in that field, and that is what gives matter mass. But what he really says here is that it's the interaction. What gives the electron mass is the interaction it has with the Higgs field. So in some ways, it's like saying, like, pretend instead of air, it was honey that you moved through, right? Like you would feel it would take force to move through that honey. And you could say, well, the honey weighs this much, but it's not the weight of the honey that gives you inertia or gives you mass. It's like the force it takes to move through it. Do you see what I mean? So in some ways, I think that is a simplified way, but in some ways, it's the interaction with the Higgs field that he'll say here, which is essentially, ditching and picking up weak hypercharge, is what gives matter mass. So,
Right.
so if you and you can stop it at 5. What was it? 550.
I have this. Part of this is me. I have this philosophy. I don't mind using your content.
Oh, sure.
I don't want to just play that entire video because I don't actually believe in using other people's content unless you're here and you tell me, Tony, go to my video. I was thinking we were going to show some of your videos, but
oh, okay. I was just trying to show this is where I learned what I used to build that.
Okay, yeah.
So there's that. So we can just say if anybody wants to go check it out, they can check out that. It's called the Higgs Mechanism. It's from 2009 from PBS Spacetime, and you can watch the whole thing. And what he'll tell you is that it's the left-handed electron. It's that mass comes from the interaction with the Higgs field, and that the left-handed electron is what the Higgs field's constantly grabbing. And the Higgs field is the only field that has a vacuum value, a non-zero vacuum expectation value. Essentially, in empty space, there's still energy in the Higgs field. And I think that's the communication of gravity between different sources, because that's the only thing that, sort of communicates through the vacuum when it's a vacuum. So we don't need to show the rest of that if you don't want to. But essentially, what that told me was,
I think you're doing a good job of explaining it.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to check it out, they can check it out on their own time. We don't have to show it to them, especially if you're not comfortable doing that.
No, part of this is just it's irking me. It's nothing to do with you or Alexei. I have this very.
What did
I do? I just like to respect other people's content creation.
Yeah.
And if I feel like I'm encroaching on their content. So
sure, man. That's cool.
But I was thinking you had some video also that we could share, right?
Yeah. Well, so we will definitely get there. And so that video, the Higgs mechanism, that was where I learned when I said, okay, so what causes mass? Well, it turns out the Higgs field causes mass. And so then I was like, well, how do I get a hold of the Higgs field? Because obviously I got to cancel it, right? If the thing, when it flies, if it's massless, I got to figure out how to cancel the Higgs field. And so that's when I learned that the left-handed electron is what is getting hung up by the Higgs field. If you watch that video that we just talked about, like a little bit further on, you'll see that this left-handed electron is like banging into the Higgs field, and the Higgs field's like essentially holding it up. And I thought, well, if the Higgs field is holding on to this left-handed electron and pulling on it, then that means Newton's third law, right? Equal and opposite, action creates an equal and opposite reaction. That means the left-handed electron's pushing on the Higgs field too. And so I said, well, okay, how do I catch these left-handed electrons to sort of get a hold of the Higgs field and cancel it, right? In graphene, right, which is like a one atomic sort of layer sheet of carbon, and it's arranged in a hexagonal sort of matrix. And what he says is, in this video, is he says that when you put a magnetic field perpendicular through graphene, because of the nature of the hexagonal lattice, it teases out these left-handed electrons. And he says these electrons just sit in the magnetic field, and they sit there and they just orbit in what he calls cyclotron orbits.
I wanted to get to a level that a lot of people like me who aren't formally trained in physics, I take a 2x4, I take some nails, I nail it together, I create a wall. I stand up the wall, I put sheeting on it. That kind of how did you put this thing together in the basic parts?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm. That's exactly. Yeah. So I say it has to be massless. What causes mass? Because I need to get rid of it. The Higgs field causes mass. Well, how do I grab the Higgs field, right, to cancel it or break it or whatever? And it's the left-handed electron that is like holding on to the Higgs field. And so then I'm like, well, how do I get left-handed electrons, right? Because if the left-handed electron's hanging on the Higgs field and I want to break the Higgs field, then I need to grab these left-handed electrons and do something with them. And this guy, Dr. Lawrence Eves from the University of Nottingham, working on graphene, said that when you pass a magnetic field through this hexagonal lattice, it makes these left-handed electrons just float in cyclotron orbits inside your magnetic field. So so now if I pass a magnetic field through a hexagonal lattice, I'm going to catch the left-handed electrons. That's what's holding on to the Higgs field. So that's how I grab the Higgs field, because if I want to do anti-gravity, I got to cancel the Higgs field. The left-handed electrons are holding on to the Higgs field. And I just found out a way from these two videos to create a magnetic field, and I could fill it with left-handed electrons that are hanging onto the Higgs field. And so now we can look at the picture of the Faraday disk. Now, the Faraday disk, Michael Faraday invented a Faraday disk 200 years ago. What he did was he took a copper disk and he spun it. And then he stuck a magnet on the side of it. And what that did was it shoved electrons to the middle of the disk, which made it more negative, and that left this side more positive.
This was the disk up here.
Yep, one. Yep. Now, so you can see the magnet on the side. Now, when that disk spins, that magnet shoves the electrons to the middle. That makes the middle minus, and it makes the outside plus, which is just like the plus and minus sides of a battery.
If the electrons in the disk itself.
Yep. And the magnet shoves them into the middle. And so that makes the middle minus and the edge plus. And so that's like a battery. And then if you take a wire and you connect the edge to the middle, right, then you have a circuit. And anytime you have, because it's just like connecting a wire to the middle or to the minus and plus side, it will cause current to flow from the minus to the plus.
Is that what this little metal, is that like a little copper bar right there that makes contact with the disc as it spins?
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's exactly what it is, man. You got it. You've totally got it. And so when the current flows from the outside through that contact and it goes up and it'll go to the middle of the disc, probably you can't see it, or maybe it's connected to the black mount. Mm-hmm. When that current is flowing, anytime you have a flowing current, it creates a magnetic field. That's just like physics. So it just does. So, and if you look, close that picture and look at that other picture, the next picture I showed you, that is the magnetic field geometry of essentially a Faraday disk. Now that's like a cross section where you're looking at, but it's essentially blowing up the center and going around the outside and coming back through the back. And if you go, and there was just a really neat picture of, I think it was like, I don't know, it was a neutron star or something. The next one. That's sort of what it looks like, right? That's what it looks like. That's still a cross section, but you can sort of see how it's a donut shape.
The beginnings of a black hole, it looks like.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, but that is the same field geometry that you get from the electromagnetic field geometry that you get from a Faraday disk. So you can see, imagine that field, right? Now, the field is blowing through the surface this way. And if you put your graphene or you put your hexagonal lattice so that it's blowing perpendicular, Dr. Lawrence Eves says that you're going to fill that magnetic field with left-handed electrons. Excuse me. And the left-handed electrons is what's hanging onto the Higgs field. And so, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, super. So so if you can go to the next one.
Let's see.
Okay, so that's the Higgs. So now I've got my magnetic field. You keep going. And now, so, but here's the thing is that I can't, my over here, you can see right here, I call it the amp. Essentially it's the hexagonal lattice, right? I have nickel graphene sandwich, right? That's what my magnetic field blows through. That's my lattice. But I need to fabricate, and you call it a metamaterial, whatever you want, but essentially a nano layered alloy of a bunch of layers of these hexagonal atomic structures, these hexagonal lattice, so I can fill that magnetic field with enough left-handed electron density to do it. And right now I just have like nickel and graphene. And if you play my can you play my video of So this was
This
essentially, yeah, this is the Vag Mark 1. Now you'll see in this video, so I've got essentially a Faraday disc that's spinning, and I have magnets all evenly around the side. So this will show you how it works. So you can see there's the Faraday disc in the middle. It's like there's a sheet of graphene over it. And I'm essentially connecting the leads that connects the plus to the minus to complete the circuit. And then I have a multimeter that shows me to make sure that I have a circuit, because you can't like tell if you don't have like a electromagnetic field detector like in your ear or anything. You have to see, oh yeah, there's a circuit. So I use a multimeter to make sure that there's a circuit. And I'm testing for resistance, and there's like no resistance, but there's a circuit. So then I switch it to milliamps so I can see how much power the Faraday disc is generating. When I spin it, it causes a current to go, and I think I get a couple of fractions of a milliamp. A little.
Fire it up. Ready?
You see, now that's generating about half a milliamp of voltage. I'm sorry, half a millivolt of voltage. Yeah.
So it's set on volts, not amps there. Yeah.
Millivolts. Yeah, millivolts.
Yeah.
No, the disc is copper, right?
Okay.
Let's check it out. Let's see.
But it's actually spokes.
Okay, so
It's part of it where it's covered in graphene, but the disc, the copper part, is actually spokes that's passing through those magnet frames. So it's not just creating a field, it's creating like a surge in the energy. You see what I mean? Because as it goes
right
through,
here.
yep, those are magnets. See those thin magnets? Yep.
Oh, they're okay. They're just turned up on their edge.
Yep.
Okay. Huh.
And so those are
positive.
And when the spokes come through it, it makes it kind of pulse. It makes it a harmonic field.
Let's just fire it up.
And
Almost
the
like
graphene
an electric motor, kind of.
Yep, there's an electric motor underneath of it that spins it. And so there's an electric motor spinning it, and it's spinning that disc through all those magnet spokes. The spokes are going through that frame, and so that's causing essentially a harmonic pulse, a surge of sort of electric potential. And so the way it works is the Faraday disc spins, creates that magnetic field that we saw, but because the magnetic field is passing through that hexagonal lattice of the graphene, it's causing left-handed electrons to sit in that field and just sit there and orbit. And so here's the only thing that really differs from my view, my hypothesis is that the gravity field is the Higgs field, but the Higgs vacuum expectation value is like 246 gigaelectron volts. That's consensus. I think it's negative 246 gigaelectron volts for a lot of different reasons, but that's the only real thing that is sort of different from my perspective that I think is non-consensus. And so when we create this magnetic field and it's full of these left-handed electrons, and I'm pumping the field, I'm vibrating the field, like when you microwave your food, right? You put your food in the microwave, it bombards it with microwaves, and the microwaves hit your food and bounce off, and it causes your food to shake. And the shake is the heat in your food. The energy that you're putting into food when you microwave it is just because the microwaves hit it and bounce off, and it causes them to vibrate and shake. And if they vibrate and shake too much, it breaks, and the energy in those bonds releases, and it's like flames or it burns or what have you. And so I'm putting energy into those cyclotron left-handed electrons by causing that by that pulse. When those spokes flip through those magnets, it causes a harmonic potential, increase, decrease, and it shakes them. And so the way it works is you create this magnetic field, you pack it full of left-handed electrons, and then you shake them. And if I'm right that the Higgs field is negative 246, and if I can shake 246 gig electron volts into those left-handed electrons that are orbiting in my field, then that would 246 minus 246 plus 246 0. So then the Higgs field is 0, drops to 0. If I'm right that the Higgs field is a negative energy vacuum expectation value, and if I can shake 246 into that field, then everywhere in that donut, everything in that donut would have to be massless. If I'm right, because the Higgs field, we heard Dr. Matt O'Dowd say the Higgs field gives matter mass. We heard Lauren, and he said that the left-handed electron is holding on to the Higgs field, and the Higgs field is holding on to the left-handed electron. And then we hear Dr. Lawrence Eves say left-handed electrons sit in cyclotron orbits inside a magnetic field if you pass the field through graphene. And so, but here's the thing. Hexagonal lattices, they can come from graphene, carbon. They can come from nickel. If you look at nickel, nickel's a hexagonal too. And I showed you a few, some of those other pictures that I texted you.
Mm-hmm.
Bismuth, magnesium, and zinc are also hexagonal lattices. Bismuth, magnesium, and zinc. Now, if you pull up that one picture of Tom DeLonge's fragment that he bought for the To the Stars Academy, and he had to disclose to the SEC or whatever as part of, I don't know, some kind of disclosure, he said that that fragment is nano-layered bismuth, magnesium, and zinc.
There we go.
Okay, so right there, that's nano-layered bismuth, magnesium, and zinc, all hexagonal lattice layers. And
how was this created? I guess they.
Well, I don't know. It's a UFO fragment, right? I mean, whoever's flying UFOs, they're the ones who created it.
Oh,
right?
That's the claim about this piece right here.
Yeah, he said that is a UFO fragment, and it's been scientifically analyzed. And you see those layers, those little nano layers there? That's bismuth, magnesium, and zinc layers. Just repeating. And so, and that makes perfect sense if what Dr. Lawrence Eves said, because he said you pass a magnetic field through a hexagonal lattice, you get cyclotronic orbiting left-handed electrons. Well, if you have nano layers, you probably get like thousands and thousands and thousands of those electrons populating your field. I'm convinced that, and I did not know that about that fragment or whatever, right? I did know because I was using one sheet of graphene, right? That was in the Mark I. It was one sheet of graphene. I was like, okay, I'm going to do anti-gravity. Here's one sheet of graphene, passing it through. Where's my left-hand electrons? And I got a swing of like 7% maybe, but I've never seen like the whole thing go totally massless. And I realized that it's like, dude, I need more than one, hexagonal layer to get enough left-handed electron density in my field to make everything in the field go massless. Like I probably have, you have some, right? But you need to fill that field with those left-handed electrons, I think, to get more anti-gravitic effect. And so, but then I saw that Tom DeLonge bought that fragment, that, alleged UFO fragment, and it's nano-layered bismuth, magnesium, zinc. And I went and looked up what's the molecular, or the sort of atomic configuration of bismuth, magnesium, zinc like that. Guess what? It's all hexagons too. And so now it makes perfect sense that why that fragment is a fragment is just because of what I know about Dr. Lawrence Eves' research and he wasn't doing anti-gravity at all. He was just left-handed electrons circling in cyclotron orbits. And he thought it had lots of applications for, things like transistors or whatever. And I'm sure it does. But you put that with Dr. Matt O'Dowd saying the Higgs field is hanging onto these left-handed electrons. And I'm like, dude, I'm going to make a Faraday disk. I'm going to have that field blow through essentially a nano-layered, I call it a anti-gravity amp. But it's going to blow through that. It's going to fill my field full of left-handed electrons. And then I'm going to shake them I'm gonna shake 246 gig electron volts into the Higgs field and drop it to 0. That's how I'm gonna do anti-gravity. And so right now the stuff that I could build with just the stuff I could get on YouTube is like 20 gauge sheets of nickel and graphene. And so I have this sort of ghetto sandwich that's like of that nickel plates and graphene in between on top. And if you play my video of the Mark IV, I get a solid probably half pound. And so the way I tested it, you can see back behind me is there's like a 100-pound butcher scale. I put the rig on the scale, I turn it on, and it should get lighter, right?
Is it this one right here?
Yeah, that's the one right there.
Let's see.
And that's the one where I had my amp and everything. I was like I was hoping for a lot more, but it was like, dude, I got like a third of a pound or a half a pound.
I can hear you saying, yeah.
I know. I was like, yes. I was like, so there it's like 71. You can see you can see it's 71 pounds right there. If you swing it, if you drag it back to the see it's a little bit higher. It's like 71 and a half or 71. See what I mean? So I spun it, it was cranking, and it dropped maybe half of a pound or a third of a pound. And that's solid. No shaking, no nothing. But what I should have did was then cut it off so you could see it go back up to 71 and a half or whatever it was. So really what I have is I think that gave me at least for me in my mind, that gave me proof of concept, right? So when anybody says like, and if people don't believe me, I don't care. I do not care one bit. Like I don't want to convince anybody. If you don't think it's anti-gravity, that's cool. I don't care. I mean, not you, but if anybody thinks it's not anti-gravity, it doesn't bother me. What I need to do, the next thing I need to do, and this is what I'm going to be, and I just got approved. I got approved from my work. I work at the Securities and Exchange Commission, and they're really like anal about not letting anybody get income from other places, right? Because you can't work for a business and like work for the SEC if the SEC regulates that. You know what I mean? It's like conflicts of interest and stuff. They're really like strict about that. And so, but I got them to let me submit my design to DARPA. And they said I could do it if I do it in my capacity as me, which is something that SAM.gov, which is the sort of the agency or the activity that regulates and kind of like, puts the whole system together for if you want to be a government contractor. But it finally got squared away, and they, gave me a contract, like identification number and everything, and a cage code or whatever it is. And so I'm in the system. So now I can submit it. I'm in the system, so I can submit it for grant or research award or whatever. So now it's on me to essentially file that, get the grant or whatever. And if I get it, here's what I'm going to tell them. I'm going to say, look, this is anti-gravity right here, and if I can fabricate this nano-layered thing, right, this nano-layered hexagonal sort of lattice, this alloy, it's essentially, it's kind of a metamaterial, I guess. It's the closest thing that I've heard to actually be called a legit metamaterial. But I know exactly how I need to do it. Essentially, you can use electroplating, or if we can 3D print it, that's cool too. But essentially, I need to fabricate this nano-layered, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. I'm going to, do just like, and Tom DeLonge follows me. So I'm going to like try and message him and say, hey, what's the order of those stratas? So I can fabricate.
I wonder what the thickness of those are. Those
microns, I'm sure. Microns.
Yeah, which would be kind of difficult with a 3D printer, right?
Yeah, maybe. I'm not a fabricator.
It's almost like
but I'm going to find
chemistry somehow.
Yeah, like electroplate it, right? Like gold plate stuff. You just electroplate it with
like how you galvanize something. Yeah.
Photolithography.
Yeah, man. And so somebody's really good at that, right? Not me. But I know what I need.
Alexei can do it.
Yeah, I talked to him about it. We actually if I get that money, could you do it for me? He's like, I don't know. See,
I need a clean lab, and we're good.
So, but the whole thing is that I know exactly what I need. I need to fabricate this nano-layered thing, just like Tom DeLonge has. I'm certain that's what it's for. I'm certain that is a Hall fragment because it just fits with everything, all the research, my theory of anti-gravity. And you can't make that up. It's not like, I mean, I thought this up by going that, you have a problem to solve, right? As a contractor, a builder, or an engineer, right? So I'm like, they must be massless. What causes mass? It's the Higgs field. How do I get a hold of the Higgs field? It's the left-handed electron. How do I get left-handed electrons? Well, pass a magnetic field through a hexagonal lattice, and it'll put left-handed electrons in your magnetic field. And I'm like, okay, then I'm going to shake them. And if I'm right that the Higgs field is the gravity field, negative energy density, if I can shake 246 gig electron volts into those electrons, then that must drop the Higgs field to 0. And then anything in the field goes massless. And people can tell me I'm wrong if they want. That's fine. What's going to prove I'm wrong is if I fabricate this alloy and I use it on the VAG Mark V, and if it doesn't substantially crush that mass down to very little, then I'm wrong. Then I'm wrong. Or I need to go back to the drawing board or something. But nobody, I don't care who it is, I don't care what their credentials are, nobody is building anything as far as I can tell or see or know of when it comes to anti-gravity. So there's no expert in the world, unless, if they came to me and said, hey, look, I've done it, this is but nobody's doing this. Nobody understands it. I think it's pretty clear, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to fabricate this thing. And if I got to do it with my own money, I'll do it with my own money. And there's actually people who've recently like DM'd me. It's like, dude, I will fund that for you if you want to do it. And I was like, I haven't responded to him yet. I really appreciate it. I don't know if you're listening, but thank you. I think the SEC will probably have a problem with that, but I'm not. Anyway, bottom line is,
I didn't realize you were still working at the SEC.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I just do this as a hobby in my
you're
free
sort
time.
of what? Don't you work in the capacity as an attorney there, or what do you do?
No, I am an attorney. I'm at
the SEC. What capacity there?
Oh, I'm a what they call a learning officer. So
okay.
I kind of like assess like needs and things and come up with training programs and all that kind of stuff. And I run training programs for the for the Securities and Exchange Commission. So yeah. So
Alexei, do you have any?
Well, I think other people do have worked on anti-gravity as well. I'm not saying that what you're doing is wrong or anything like that. I'm just saying that other people have taken different approaches, and they've been working on that for a very long time, since like 1912, 1920, right? You start with Thomas Townsend Brown doing electrogravitics, and then all the people that have followed up on his work for the last 120 years. But what I found really interesting is the question I have then is what makes the left-handed electron have an interference pattern in essence with the Higgs field and not the right-handed electron. And if you consider everything being in a state of rotation, well, maybe it's because the right-handed, I'm just maybeing and ifing here, maybe the right-handed electron is flowing at the same speed and rotation as the Higgs field, whereas the left-handed electron is actually in a counter rotation, giving it that friction coefficient, or whatever you want to call it, gravity, or mass, whatever word you want to use.
Yeah, I mean, so now this is total speculation, right? Because what you're saying is an interesting question. And I've thought about it too. As an engineer, as sort of a problem solver, right? I'm really focused on what I need to do to solve the problem. That's an interesting question about why is it the left and not the right?
Boundary conditions come to mind to me. You know what I'm saying? Like the boundary condition of the left versus the right in relationship to a Higgs field. So the right, you get what I'm saying already, maybe?
Yeah, I completely get what you're saying. For purposes of the actual engine itself, I'm kind of taking Matt O'Dowd's word for it, right? I'm just going to go with it. But if you want to talk about it, so I think the universe is a hologram, right?
Yeah.
And so you split if the holographic surface of the black hole is like this. Now, an oscillation in that field, right, is going to punch through, like say, and so if this is the interior of the black hole on this side, I think space-time blows through the surface of a black hole, which is causing universal expansion. And it's also why the brand new neutrino map looks like balloons of exploding space, because I think the neutrino is the marker for space-time. You know that. But so if it's blowing through the surface, right? Now, if our oscillation, I think the Higgs field leashes energy to the surface of the black hole. And so when it punches through, right, when it punches through going forward in time, I think that's probably the left-handed, because it's like sort of fighting. It's like if space-time's blowing this way, it's fighting to go through. But when it swings back around and it's going with the flow of time, that's why the right-handed electron doesn't experience anything. It's just like, whoop, it's just like whipping through. It's like going with the flow of time. It experiences no time. You heard Dr. Matt O'Dowd say that. And so in some ways, it's like here's time, it's flowing this way, but it's going with it. So it doesn't ever cross the curvature of time. So it makes perfect sense to me. And it totally jives with my theory of everything, right? The sonic gravity theory of everything, that if we're on the 2D holographic surface of the black hole, if the oscillation is, if time's blowing this way and the electron's like fighting through, you know, that's where I think you get that. That's where you get that like grab. That's where you get that sort of, hanging on to it. But then when it curves back around and comes through, punching back through the other side, it probably goes quick. You know what I mean? And so it doesn't, it's and if time's going this way and it's going to, time never passes it, right? It never experiences any time going past it. It's running with it 100%.
The right hand's kind of going with the flow of time. Left hand's going against the flow of time. Easiest way to think of it.
Like when you look at antiparticle pairs, all of the quantum information is flipped. It's all antimatter goes backwards in time, goes, has the opposite spin, the opposite charge. And so that makes perfect sense with what antimatter is. And so really, antimatter doesn't cancel when a particle hits an antimatter particle. Antimatter cancellation is when I think, and the explosion is when the same particle hits the antiparticle. Like it's when it's the same one. That's when you get, I think, matter-antimatter annihilation. Now, this is totally speculative. Oh, yeah. It just kind of seems to intuitively fit with my theory of everything. And so I'm saying that I'm trying to keep that conversation separate from the engineering, left-handed electron passing through, that's all. To me, that's seems like that's the most safe I can be when it comes to trying to get somebody to fund my research. Is like, here's what causes mass. This guy says you generate left-handed electrons and catch them in a magnetic field this way. I just need to fabricate my bug catcher, my left-handed electron bug catcher, to go on top of my Faraday disc.
The thing I'm trying to figure out is that, so I understand that the Higgs field sort of permeates the ether, right? We're assuming that it just is part of the fabric. How do you calculate, or is there more energy there than we need to worry about? How do you calculate at any point in space the value of the energy you can extract, or you know what I mean? So how do you determine?
Well, the scientific consensus says that the vacuum expectation value for the Higgs field, just in the vacuum in space, is 246 gigaelectron volts. That's what they said. So I'm just going by what they say. That's just consensus. The vacuum expectation value of the Higgs, if you Google it or whatever, 246. I think my sort of theory of anti-gravity essentially requires it to be negative 246.
But what can you do? What can you do with that? How do you add the effect? How do you get an exponential effect or an accumulative effect of that energy? Or is it does it work that way?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so the way I'm approaching it is a harmonic approach. And in a lot of ways, it's like pushing a kid on a swing, right? The frequency, you can think of frequency. Don't think of it like a real technical frequency, but it's essentially, say you push a kid on a swing and it takes 2 seconds for him to go out and come back, right? Every 2 seconds, right? goes out, comes back. That's half a hertz. That's a frequency, right? It's a half a cycle a second. If it takes 2 seconds for them to go out and come back, it's a half a cycle a second. So it's a half a hertz. That's the frequency. But essentially, gravity, if this is gravity wave frequencies, like around, there's some maybe a kilohertz or more, just depends how much gravity, but essentially you just push those left-handed electrons are sitting there. You need to push them and they go out and come back, just like a kid on a swing. And if you can push at the gravity wave frequency in that, particular area of the Higgs field, then theoretically, and you'll hear if you listen to Dr. Lawrence Eves, he says the cyclotron orbits, they can achieve any energy level depending on their momentum, and there's no limit. So if you can find that frequency, that resonant frequency where you push it, the kid goes out and comes back. If you can hit that electron, so it goes out and comes back, and you keep bumping it at the right frequency, you can excite that thing like crazy. And it's just like heating food in your microwave. I'm going to heat that. I'm going to essentially bounce that electron so hard, and it's going to put that energy in the Higgs field. And if I can
gravity makes the kid on the swing come back. What makes in your case, makes
same?
No, I mean, if you're in deep space and there is no force, or there's no
246 gigaelectron volts. They say the value of the field is 246 even in the vacuum. So it's still there. You're
not massless in the vacuum. Yeah.
What's that?
Oh, just to Artisan's point, you're not massless in a vacuum.
Yeah, you're not massless in a vacuum, right? Like you float off into space, you keep going, right? Because you have mass.
That's what I was saying. If you're in the vacuum of space, once you push something and give, sorry, microphone.
Yeah, your microphone has mass too.
It's just going to keep going.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Unless there's an opposite force to bring it. So that's what I was trying to figure out. What brings it back once you place that force on?
Oh, so So if something is massless, right? So let's just pretend, right, for the sake of arguments, that we spin up our field, we fill it full of left-hand electrons, we shake them real good, we shake 246 gigaelectron volts into that field, drops the mass of everything in that field to 0, right? That means everything's massless. It's just sitting there, right? So now it's like, it's like one of those UAP, right? We'll just say it's like just sitting there floating, right? It's doing nothing. So how do they move, right? So instead of having like a solid disc, right? My disc, right, is a hoop. And I think the field geometry is a hoop. And I think if you put one this way, and I think if you put one this way, then essentially those hoops create like an envelope. So you have essentially an anti-gravity bubble, right? But in the middle, you're good. Like you're walking around, working the controls, all that kind of stuff, right? So it's a Faraday hoop, right? And it leaves the middle. Everybody in the middle, you can still work the stick and the controls and put your drink down and whatever. But what it does is it essentially creates a field around you where there is no mass, and there's no communication, quantum communication of gravity information to your mass inside the field from the rest of the universe. So if I'm right,
so it's even exempt from entangled particles, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's essentially you're severing your connection to the rest of the universe. Essentially, it's like different space-time.
I think I had an initial impression of entangled particles is that there was a connection between them, but that's not actually the case, right? They're just, once you know the value or the spin of one, then you automatically know the spin of the other. It's not that.
Right. Well, okay.
There's a debate about whether they're actually entangled as physically or not, right?
No, I think there's a locality, non-locality argument. But if you remember, now, and I know you're not a fan of like the holographic principle, right? But just pretend it's a hologram and pretend our consciousness is on the hologram, and we're just plugged into the hologram, and all we experience is what's on the hologram. Well, that means that an orbital oscillation through the hologram, all you're going to see is 2 points where it connects. Right? You're not going to see the orbit. You're only going to see the left-handed particle and the right-handed particle, because you don't see the hoop because it's not on the hologram, right? I think that's dark matter. But all you experience if you're on the hologram is just those two quantumly entangled points. And you know, if this one's going this way, it's going to swing around. It's going the other way. And that's why they're opposite all the time.
I just
Quantum
wish there was
entanglement.
another term. I think the theory would be more successful if there was another term besides hologram. If there was another term, I could, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the fact that
subatomic information matrix.
if it's somehow also my idea of black holes is that a hologram wouldn't survive being close to a black hole. So I don't. That's the only. You mentioned that I wasn't a fan. I think we've talked about this before. It's not that I'm not a fan. I just don't. I can't imagine it. That's what I'm trying to.
But just forget the rest, and I get that, right? And I'm past trying to convince anybody of it. But if you thought of it, just suspend your disbelief about the other stuff. If it was true that there was a hologram, and that's where we got our information from. If you take, one of these orbiting SU1 symmetries, so these orbiting particles, the only points of intersection of that hoop of energy is going to be the particle and the antiparticle. So in a lot of ways, it does conveniently explain quantum entanglement, that those two particles are really the same particle, just punching through the hologram in two different places. And so when you know the spin or whatever, this one, the other one's opposite every single time. And so to me, it just makes perfect sense that way. But I understand, like, for a lot of people, maybe it doesn't. But back to the if I'm right about anti-gravity, if it creates this sort of envelope that disconnects the quantum communication of the Higgs field of gravity, then whatever's in here, right? It has mass, all that stuff, but it is in almost a completely different space-time where it's not, gravity's not pulling on it from anywhere else. Now, the way I think quantum propulsion works, right, is imagine you have a microwave oven, right? And you take the door off and you put it like in the front of your ship. It's not in the field, it's in where you're at, right? And you have this bubble of anti-gravity. Essentially, I call it a mass hole, right? No mass. It's a mass hole. Now, we know that Casimir forces, like the universe, hates a vacuum, and it's trying super hard to push stuff into that mass hole. Well, if you take your microwave oven, your directional microwaves, and you turn it on and you blast the microwave oven, you take the door off and you shoot a bunch of microwaves out the front of your ship. Well, you're putting a little something in the front, right? In the field in the front. And so the universe is going to go, well, okay, there's a little teeny something there, so we don't have to push so hard on the front, right? And that creates, that manipulates the quantum vacuum. So if you put some microwaves in the front, then it's going to be pushing harder on the back.
Doesn't that have to be an external force?
I don't think there's any reason you couldn't shoot it from internally, because the only thing that you're
what happens when it interacts with that barrier, the bubble, though, or the field or whatever, the microwaves?
Hard to say. I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, it might do something. I do think that when you shoot microwaves,
hopefully not bounce back at you.
Well, I think it probably damages the ship. You know how, like, they were who's that really smart guy from Stanford? Gary Nolan. Yeah. So he was examining essentially molten slag that fell off of a UFO, and because you can imagine, like, the heat and the friction and everything, if that field kind of shrinks down and starts to cook part of your ship, like, right, it can melt off. Well, he was saying that those isotope ratios were off, and I think that might happen if you shoot microwaves through massless bismuth, magnesium, zinc. You might pinball some of those atoms, right? And maybe you bust some of them, and that changes the isotope ratios. So I think that's why, that's why the CIA guys were getting sick, was because I think some of the, I think when you fly these craft, if they work like I think they work, And if you're using microwaves to essentially, you shoot a microwave out the front, you put some energy in the front. So the universe says, oh, that we don't have to push as hard on the front as we do on the back. I think these craft steer and motivate themselves by shooting microwaves through that quantum vacuum, and they just follow that like a tractor beam. I think that's why they zip around and go crazy, because they're just following, they're just manipulating the quantum vacuum, and the universe is just scooting them around everywhere, wherever they want to go. And I think if you take a close look at experiencers, at least I've noticed after I sort of sorted this out, there's people who are, by UFOs or whatever, and they come away with RF burns and radio frequency burns and radiation burns. I think it's possibly, if it works like I think it does, it's possibly they're getting hit essentially by the jet engines, right? By the microwave emissions that those craft use to manipulate vacuum to zip around and essentially use 0-point energy propulsion. And so, but if you're massless and the universe is pushing on you, F equals ma, right? Newton's law, force equals mass times acceleration. If your mass is 0 and the universe puts any force on you, you're going to accelerate infinity. And so that's how you get your instantaneous velocity and your act, where I think if this is right, man, we're talking about light speed travel, like no lie. We're absolutely talking about light speed travel. Actions of light speed.
I wish there was another term besides massless to use also, because to me it's almost like
I'm talking engineering mass. Yeah, I mean, it seems like matter.
Proxy
here's
mass,
the thing.
Proxy massless. In other words, it's the effect of masslessness, but it's not actual. The object inside the field is not massless. It's not massless, right? Because it has to maintain its form. Because when you turn off the machine or you turn off the field, you still have to be, you still want to have mass available.
That's called renormalization. Physicists who do a lot of stuff like renormalization, and that's what I mean, that you obviously I mean, that's a big deal, right? Like, we all want to come home, you know what I mean? Like, if we fly in one of these things, we don't want to fly apart. And Kevin Knuth, he's like a really good dude. When I told this to him, this was at the very beginning when I first sort of figured this out. He's like, well, he goes, that might be kind of gnarly, especially if we, explode like a nuclear bomb at the speed of light, and so that was actually kind of like, I used that in my podcast during the time. I was like, hopefully we won't explode like a nuclear bomb at the speed of light. That actually came from Dr. Kevin Knuth, because I floated it past him. And but anyway, so
it's funny, because if you're in the vacuum of space, it would be easy to manipulate an object like that. But when you got to inside the or you started getting close to a star or even a planet like the Earth, maybe that's why some of these craft crash.
Yeah, I mean, because you have to have the integrity of that magnetic field. You have to have your harmonic magnetic field to maintain masslessness. And there's a lot of magnetic forces in the universe that,
well, you don't have the benefit of being able to just shoot a little particle out and go in one direction either. Now you're fighting some real gravity.
Yeah, I mean, gravity. Yeah. I don't think gravity would give you a problem, right? Because you have no mass.
I'm talking about as far as steering the.
Yeah, I mean, well, but when you get a magnetic field, if you fly, but there are a lot of stellar bodies that put out seriously full magnetic fields.
I'm saying if you're only using microwaves, if you're only using microwaves to steer, now the microwaves themselves are going to be under the effect of the gravity of Earth when you get inside. When you get that into that proximity, right? Before you could, but if you're in the vacuum of space, you can just shoot a particle, microwave particle out, and it's going to just go, and it's going to give you that reaction that you're looking for. But once you get to Earth, you shoot a microwave out, and it's going to go. Shoot, huh?
You could get some kind of solar flare. There's some kind of magnetic anomaly that knocks out your field, and then what happens? Man,
yeah.
I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Maybe nothing is perfect. People keep saying, well, how do they come this far and crash? Well,
dude, there's so many ways to die. Like, I mean, and I'm not trying to convince them of nothing. You know what I mean? Like, I think everybody needs to make the best decision they can for themselves. And if they don't believe anti-gravity or they don't think I have it, I totally get it. Cool.
What's funny to me is that you're really only talking about technology that's only maybe 100 years ahead of us. They're not. It's not like these. It doesn't mean they have to be 1,000 years ahead of us for that type of technology, right? If all we're doing is figuring out how to layer, have a lattice of bismuth and carbon or whatever. I mean, we can with observe atoms with scanning electron microscopes.
Yeah, man.
I've seen them manipulate atoms. Have you seen the videos of where they're rearranging the atoms into shapes? Using
I have not
electron.
seen that.
Yeah, you can. I mean, it's funny because it just occurred to me that maybe they're not that much more advanced than we are, and that would also explain why they might crash.
Well, one thing to note too is I've done a lot of the research on this as well, and a lot of people say that there's two different types of propulsion systems on these vehicles. One for when they're in the atmosphere of the planet, and one for when they're in somewhat deep space. So it seems like the microwave emitter technology is more of a deep space thing. An electrogravitic thing might be more of the planetary atmosphere type of thing. At the same time, it's really easy to knock them down when you have advanced radiation weapons. So
yeah. Well, if you think about it, if you had we had Q-36 and Q-37 radar in the Army. I was retired from the Army, but we use these Q-36, these big batteries of radar with all these it looks like a giant square with a bunch of little tin cans or whatever, black cans, and it's a huge radar array. And what it does is it picks up incoming mortars, and it'll tell you where they are, and so you can fire back artillery on the position that just shot at you. And you can return fire in under a minute. You know what I mean? You got rounds going downrange at them.
Well, and that's somewhat older technology too, because now they even have you have the tracking, and then you have a laser that's actually shooting up, and you have one that's correcting for atmospheric distortions, and then you have one somewhat firing through it. With the heat to actually take.
But if you wing them on the bottom, if you just send out a massive pulse of microwaves or whatever, and if you wing them on the bottom, that's going to tell the universe, it's going to be oh, there's more stuff down here, so we need to push harder up here, and it'll shoot them straight to the ground. If you shoot them on the belly, if you wing them across the belly, if it works the way I think it does, then you'd bring them straight down to the ground. They would just rocket to the ground. You know what I mean?
It seems like any penetration in that field would allow, what would be the term?
It would definitely affect their flight. That's for sure. I think
contamination was the word I was thinking of. It would contaminate the field, right?
So how does that relate to a lot of people are saying that these things are somewhat consciously controlled as well. So do you think that instead of using a microwave, you can just use thought from inside?
Well, yeah. I mean, so
I don't know, speculation.
Yeah. Well, so okay, so I think there's lots of ways that can work, right? So if right now, you can put electrodes on my head and around my whatever, right? And they can, they can say, okay, think up, and I'll just think to myself up. I won't say it, but I'll think it. And they can record the signal that they detect as up.
They can even decode dreams to a degree at this point.
Yeah. And so you can put a helmet on me.
Yeah, they're already controlling prosthetics arms that way, right?
Yeah. So they can essentially record what I think up, when I think down, when I think left or right or whatever. And so I could just put on a helmet and I could think up, and then that thing will pick up. Oh, we know he just said up. And so they could send a signal to some controller box in the UFO or whatever that says, okay, turn the microwave on that makes this go up. You know what I mean? That puts something in the microwave, essentially shoots microwaves out the top. And so then the universe will fly our ship up. So
I guess I'm just thinking it should be more complicated than that, but it doesn't have to be, right? I mean, we can already do what you're talking about right now.
I'm saying we can
Yeah.
already do
We can
that
already
with,
do that.
with
Yeah.
consciousness. I mean, that's kind of
Yeah.
the ghetto way, probably, right?
That's what I was getting at. It's more of like a very like fun, like
I mean,
very basic method.
Sure.
We already have a technology that allows people to type with the same technology you're talking about, Brad.
Yeah.
They
Stephen
can
Hawking,
type-
right?
Yeah, use the brain as a keyboard to type words on, in a processor or whatever.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that can happen, and I think, to like steer it with consciousness or whatever. I mean, now you're just talking about evolutions of that technology, right?
You might be right.
I just came up with the dumbest one you could think of, right? They're the most low tech implementation, but it could just go. It just get better from there, right?
Yeah,
It's
that's
funny
why I'm so surprised that people are so like impressed by the ability for it to be consciously controlled. It seems obvious, right? Unless you're like legitimately doing some type of like observer effect.
Yeah,
I think that people forget that our brain is just a bunch of neurons. I mean, right? It doesn't even have to be consciousness. It could just be the normal function of our brain.
That's what I'm saying. That's not really
Yeah.
consciousness. That's more just thought control, or
Yeah.
But,
but there's so much to that though, because so like say like whenever we think, right, we it like neurons fire in our brain, right? It's like electricity. Well, there's a magnetic field that goes through the whole earth. So when we think, like it or not, we're etching shit into the magnetic field. Sorry for cussing, I know. We're etching our thoughts in some form. We're perturbing that magnetic field with our, with the neurons that we're firing. And so it's conceivable that if everybody's sort of in default, when we think we're in write mode, we're writing our thoughts into the magnetic field, it's conceivable that someone could alter their state of consciousness into read mode.
Here's the way I look at consciousness in that context is that me using my brain, the circuits in my brain to control a computer is the physical part of it. The part that's consciousness is the thought, should I do that or not?
Sure.
Right. So consciousness, that part of your consciousness is separate from, to me, it's sort of an amalgamation of, anyway, I've talked about this before, but it's a long process in my head, the way I come to it, but it's sort of an accumulation of things, right? It's not just one. Consciousness is not just one thing or the other. It's when you put all the pieces of the puzzle together, then you have that. So consciousness deals to me more with philosophy than it does the actual mechanics of your brain working.
Well, the way I see it too is that it also relates to choice making, and free will. And you could say that that's why I think gravity and momentum or manifestation potential are highly intertwined with the ability to make decisions and choices. Because if I want my, because let me put it this way, like my hand is manifesting here. It's flipping in and out of solidity at scales related to like the Planck second. If I want so now I can create a potential by just thinking, moving my arm to the side. So I've shifted the manifestation potential of my arm.
Okay.
Hopefully that made some sense.
No, I think, I'm trying to follow you.
Potentials.
Totally. Well, I mean, so not to throw it back to the holographic principle, right? But just imagine that particles are that oscillation going through the hologram, right? That it's energy, right? But then when it hits the hologram is when it becomes matter, right? Mm-hmm. If every cell and every atom in your brain is just like that, that your energy and where is where it's an atom or it's a cell or whatever. Now, the energy of your consciousness is oscillation, but what's hitting the hologram is your brain, right? And so if your energy is oscillating like this and creating those particles, and then all those particles coming together in the brain, then the energy of your consciousness is way bigger than the matter in your brain, because the matter is just the echo on the hologram of the energy that is your brain. And so in a lot of ways, it's, I mean, and I know this sounds nutty and a lot of people won't agree. This is just perspective. But in a lot of ways, the consciousness of your eye, your consciousness, like people think, oh, my eyes give me sight and tell my brain what's up. But I think consciousness is the energy, and the eyes are the particles on the hologram. And so it's actually your consciousness that gives you eyes, not your eyes that give you sight.
This is starting to sound like Bernardo Kastrup's dashboard thing, right?
It is. It's exactly Bernardo Kastrup's dashboard.
Yeah.
And so your eyes are actually caused by your consciousness, which is why in your dreams, even when your eyes are closed, I think.
I'm still, it's funny, I'm still not totally on. I still think there's a
That's cool.
totally physical world, realm that we dwell in, and that there's sort of a, you know what I mean? There's sort of the conscious world, the spiritual world, and the physical world coexist. You know, I don't see that there's a need that there has to be only one or the other. You know,
but I'm stuck with, because I can't have my theory of everything. I can't have my theory of gravity.
Yeah,
I can't have any of that unless I have it all, right? So it has, if for me, so I'm stuck with it if I want to have intellectual integrity about what I think, right? Because
I don't know. I think there's still a way to work it out.
And that's why I think thought form projections have a big play in gravity. And the reason I say that is because what is momentum? And momentum is ultimately the likeliness to stay in motion, right? Objects in motion stay in motion. Object at rest stays at rest. That's momentum. Well, when you have a being of free will and choice, we're creating all these potentials based off of the state of being that we're existing in. So I would say that part of gravity, when it comes to a conscious or sentient being, rather, is free will. And so it's not just gravity of body, which is our physical dimension, our holographic layer. It's also gravity of the mind and gravity of, you could say, the stuff that's existing off the hologram. And all three of those together create manifestation potentials or locations for things to form.
I think you just need to add a dimension to your hologram. Just have it allow it to be 3 dimensions instead of 2.
Yeah, I mean,
mine is 3. That's
I think that's
so is mine, actually, right? Because the holographic existence is the 2D existence, but I'm saying there is 3D, that the dark matter is the energy when it's oscillating off the hologram, and gravity is the leash that's leashing that oscillation to space. That's why you can, when that energy is zipping around, it's deflecting time, right? Because we know that energy deflects space-time. That's what gravity is. You have that, you see that dimple, you know what I mean? When you see the planet, it causes space-time to whatever. But yeah, that's the same as zipping around in a circle and it's punching through, points or whatever. But the leash that holds it there, if it's to space-time, it's deflecting space-time a little based on the energy it has. So it's very consistent in some ways. And we call this SU1 symmetry. And I think that's the actual unification of field theory and general relativity, is that general relativity is the hologram, and that's the deflection of space-time as the oscillation goes. And so, of course, that's in my theory of everything.
That's where we also have the flow of subspace or time, or the Higgs field, whatever you want to call it, which is why the left-handed electrons and right-handed electrons act differently, which, in my opinion, proves that we're drifting in a direction. And I'd say that direction is inward, or towards a greater center of some sort. But what you kind of call it is towards the future, right? We're drifting towards the future.
So I see that. No, I see that too. I totally see that. It's just kind of so I think time flow on the hologram is actually from higher resolution to lower resolution. So in some, which is why older light is right, because it had more. It essentially, if is resolution on the pixel, the light that left, a mile away, is going to get to us a little bit later, and so it's a little bit smaller, and that's why things that are farther away look smaller. So in some ways, I totally agree, but I also think that it's we're not actually moving through time. We're stuck to this hologram on the pole, and space-time is blowing through us. And that's why the universe is expanding. That's why the neutrino map looks like bubbles that are growing. And so space-time's blowing out. The pixel smaller. So that the future is the size of pixels that are bigger than us that we can't see. And as time comes to now, the pixel hits our consciousness, what we're tuned to. But I think, does that make sense? I know that sounds totally weird.
But we can shoot lasers out into space to the moon and, measure the distance from here to the moon. So I
worked on that project.
I get confused with when we talk about pixels and you know what I mean?
Pixels on the hologram.
I get what you're saying. Like, the future is in a denser. I think the future is denser, and the past is less dense. Is the easiest way to put it.
Okay.
Why can't we just have a big 3-dimensional universe like what we observe? Why can't we have that?
Well, it does look 3-dimensional.
Huh? That's too easy.
It does look 3-dimensional.
I know, that's for us plebeians, right? we get the simple 3D universe model.
It totally can be. I think what I'm trying to do, and I think what Brad's also trying to. Well, you're working with gravity, and so ultimately, time is a big important factor of gravity. Is
time causes gravity? Yeah.
But I think we make too much of time. I think we experience it, but we don't. It's not really that much of a factor. I mean, not really. Right? We don't move through time.
I think
we move through time. We move through the fluid of time.
We experience it. We experience entropy, but that doesn't mean we have that time exists the way we think it does, right?
Well, I think, and your opinion is just as valid as mine, right?
I wouldn't say that because I don't have any training. But
nobody taught me time. I'm talking about my thing. I'm informed by my intuition, basically 100%. So that doesn't mean anything really. Well, I don't know. I think your intuition I think real as anything else.
When when people travel faster than us and they come back, they experience their reality is experienced. Obviously their clocks are slower than ours if they're traveling closer to the speed of light, right?
Yep.
But only relative to our clock.
Relative to our clocks, right? So,
yep.
There's a lot of variables in there. Anyway, I can't explain what I think about that, but I
you said, I don't have any problem with it all. I think that's the way I see it too. And we know that in a gravitational field, time moves slower.
Right.
In a gravitational field, because we have clocks that are sensitive enough that we can put one clock at the basement of the Empire State Building, one at the top, and we have clocks that are sensitive enough that we can tell that the clock that's at the ground level is going slower than the clock at the top. I mean, that's measured, right? So that's not even an issue.
Yeah, we've done it with the International Space Station too, right?
Yep. And same with
satellites that are orbiting. They need to be accounted
same with
for.
velocity.
Yeah.
Consensus.
Okay, so this might be taking it too far. So I do think we live on the surface somewhat of a holographic. There's information matrices. Our dimension is tuned to one of them, but I think that our entire dimension has an elliptical orbit around a greater center. And so we go through moments of drifting inwards towards denser vibrations, meaning the universe looks like it expands, but then we go towards motions where we're drifting back out. And so the universe kind of looks like it contracts.
The only problem I have with both of those is the fact that they seem to require orientation, and I don't think that space time requires orientation.
I think orientation might be just a construct of our mind, but at the same time, it might also be an indicator of something greater.
I
Yeah.
have to ponder that one.
That's
That's why I like having you guys.
That.
That's why I like having you guys on. It gives me things to ponder.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I really
And
like it too.
And I do. I don't like discount anything anybody says. It's like I don't agree with everything Bernardo Kastrup says, but he's actually a little more qualified than I am to have a theory, his theory. So he's coming
I
back.
think he would
With
say.
him.
I don't know, but I think he would say. I think he would take exception with that, and I think he would suggest that you're just as entitled to have your experience and to base your reality on, essentially your, instrument panel. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, he's very gracious. I mean, that's how I met him. Was how he bailed me out on Kurt's theory of everything. The Tonanza was how I became a big fan of his because
I'm
he
still
was.
impressed
good.
that all three of us were on that thing. But anyway,
Yeah.
what I want to say,
I know,
real
man. That was
quick,
highlight. That was
Yeah.
2022's highlight for me.
I want to circle it back just a second, back to Bradley, to the Voorhees anti-gravity engine real quick. So
Sure.
you're saying the reason that you, or I don't know if this is what you said. I don't want to be putting words into your mouth, but basically you're looking for more energy density. Now,
I'm looking for more electron density in the field.
and so if you're creating this very simple donut shape within, so you're looking for electrons in the over here,
Left-handed electrons.
And
I
you
want to pack that whole field full of left-handed electrons.
and you want to create a sphere of them.
Well, I just want to fill the magnetic field with left-handed electrons. And if I can do that, and if shaking those left-handed electrons drops the Higgs field to zero in, local to that where that electron is, to where that left-handed electron is shaking, if that reduces the Higgs field to the ground state in that spot, the more left-handed electrons I have closer together, denser together, means I should be able to shed more mass. If I'm right.
To me, though, a lot. So I'm going along with that same line of thinking.
Sure.
From what I've seen, a lot of the anti-gravity, in quotes, research people say it's all about creating a power density or an energy density within a specific volume, one that's typically created by an amplification process. So that's exactly what you're doing. So that's why I don't see I don't see the problem. I think, where does the rider sit? That's kind of where I'm confused, maybe.
In the middle, I said it's a hoop, it's a disc. Remember I said
You
it's
make
a fair,
disc out of them. Okay.
It's not a flat disc the whole way. It's essentially a modified disc where it's a Faraday hoop. And so in the middle, there's no field. It's blowing through around the hoop. And I need one this way, and then I need one this way. I get the field going that way so that it goes this way, and essentially creates the box.
It creates a sphere.
Yeah, it creates essentially a sphere that, and where you get the geometry of box that, who's the pilot who talked about the box and it was red at the
Graves,
yeah.
You talking about like the cubes in a sphere kind of thing?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that gives you 6 directions if you have a box, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think if you do a 2D, if you do a holographic where you have the field going, then a field going that way, you get a box because you get the field from the hoop and the field from the lateral hoop. And so that's actually a box. So that 2 holographic projection would show you a box in a field. But if you had 3, like say you had a hoop going this way, a hoop going this way, and a hoop going this way, you'd get a hexagon. And I've seen orbs, UFOs that show that hexagonal projection. And I think I drew and I posted them.
I think the one thing that really makes it all work though is that energy density, the electron density.
That's why
Yeah,
I need to fabricate that metamaterial just like Tom DeLonge had.
That's
You
why I
know?
was asking earlier when we first started talking about this was how do you find or determine the density? And you said it was, what did you say, 200 and some odd gigavolt? What was it?
That's not the density though. That's different.
246 gigaelectron
No,
volts
but-
is what the scientific consensus thinks that the vacuum expectation value of the Higgs field is.
No,
Essentially,
but that's a point.
Yeah.
That's a point value, right? So I was
yeah,
saying,
that's the amount of energy.
How do you amplify that? That's what I was talking about, Alexei.
Yeah, so that's the amount
Which would
that electron
related
needs to
density.
shake into the field. I need to shake 246 gigaelectron volts into that left-handed electron, into every left-handed electron that's in my field. And so I do that by essentially like pulsing it. And if I can get the frequency of the pulse to equal the gravitational wave so that it's like pushing it, I push them, they come back, I push them, they come back, I push them, and I just build and build and build and build energy in that field. If I can, and that's called resonance. When your loading frequency equals the structural frequency, and it's like you're pushing a kid on a swing, they go out, they come back, you push them at that perfect time, you continue to build that energy. And that's what I need to do. I need to resonate. That's what it's called. I need to resonate those left-handed electrons against the gravity wave frequency to shake enough energy into the Higgs field to drop it to the ground state. That is, hey, so good to see you too, man. And so that's the
Good to see
so
you too.
that's the
Sheen,
idea. So that's the idea, you know. And is it going to work? I don't know. I think it will. It seems really simple. I mean,
So could you create instead of having more defined materials, just so there's probably another way to create more like a stronger magnetic field would also do that. I'm asking.
yeah, I don't know. You know, I'm just going by essentially the research that I found, right? So, you know, I'm trusting Dr. Matt O'Dowd and what he says about the Higgs field and left-handed electrons, and I'm trusting Dr. Lawrence Eves from the University of Nottingham about passing it through a hexagonal lattice. So,
Well, I guess so. For your model, you have a couple things in play. You have a magnetic field being created from a Faraday disk, and then you also have a bug catcher. So if you were to increase that magnetic field, that would also create an effect within the total system, right? So,
sure.
Or you could also change your bug catcher, right? So the different models could have different variations, kind of thing. So when you change them both for the optimized value, that's where you want to be. Ultimately, I get it.
Yeah. And it's true, you know, there are different ways to modulate the frequency. You can mechanically modulate the frequency. That was what actually the greatest weight loss I saw was with the VAG, the Mark I, because it was straight up wires flicking through those magnets. And I think it went through, and you can show that video if you want to. It's the first one, it's the 8-second one, where the thing goes like, it swings way lighter and then comes right back down. I think it passed through a resonant frequency and it started to sing. That's what I think happened. And so I'm a huge proponent of, like, I really think that the key to this is the harmonics, getting a frequency, getting the spacing of the magnets and the thickness of those spokes at the right ratio, so that you just at any speed frequency, the rate at which those little between those magnets, that's the pulse, right? And so when it's going like really fast, like through all of those magnets, if you get the spacing just right at every frequency, at every speed, you'll be at the right frequency. You'll be at like a multiple of the right frequency. And so I think that's very, very doable. But we'll see. I mean, that was what really hit it for me, was that, I mean, I think if you get a more powerful field, you'll be able to have essentially a bigger ship, but then when you look at those tic tacs are perfect, because you can imagine like a Faraday hoop this way, and it's like a bunch of hoops all in series, right? Like a big long tic tac, it's like a big hot dog with all these, and then you have a crossways one at the end, so it gives you that field all the way across, and then closes it up by having, they're at the end, there's ones like this. And so you could have that whole tic tac with that huge, I call it an anti-gravity envelope, because, all of them, you have all these spinning ones all along the length. And then if a transverse one, closes it off, you can have a tic tac, man. That's how you get it. That's how you get a tic tac. I mean,
Yeah, no, I'm listening. Yeah, it's awesome.
yeah. So
however it's done, it would have to be something to create a field inside that was exempt from the inertia, right?
Yep.
Because you couldn't have humans obviously in there making right hand turns.
Right. Well, remember, it's a hoop. It's so the disc.
Yeah.
If it was a solid disc, right, then like the humans would all be massless, and you probably pass through everything. You couldn't touch anything, right? So it's got to be like a ring where it's open in the middle, so you can like walk around and stuff and like work the controls and drink your drink and all that stuff. But it's that envelope where you have like a Faraday essentially hoop, and then one maybe this way, so you create that envelope, and so you have empty space that's still normalized, right? Like you can still like go around and stuff and look at the controls and high five your co-pilot or whatever. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I think that's how I think it works.
You could also almost make like an interior Faraday cage.
Yeah, sure. Or just don't. Yeah, the field's not there. I mean,
you get what I'm saying. The field's not there somehow. You block it.
Yeah.
Or yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the disc might just do it for you, like, just the geometry of it, if it, because it blows through the surface and comes back around the other side. So, but yeah, I mean, if it works, right, there's going to be plenty of room for everybody to kind of get in there and tweak it and work on it. You know what I mean? If it works, there's so much work that could be done. And the really interesting thing is if it works, right? Imagine this. So you got this disc, this Faraday disc, and you saw how like the multimeter showed that it was generating like, 0.4 millivolts or something, right? So imagine I get my amp, my bug catcher, I spin the thing up, right? Now it's spinning and it's using, 110 volts from the power outlet to like spin it, right? But you could wire it so that the motor could eventually be switched to power itself from its own energy that's generating. And so it starts to spin, right? If it works like I think it does, creates a magnetic field, and then it starts getting lighter, right? Because it starts to reduce its own mass. Well, that lowers the friction, speeds it faster, creates more field, more energy, gets even lighter, so it goes even faster, creates more energy, more field, even lighter. So in some ways, it could be like a chain reaction where once it spins up all the way and it's powering itself, right, you're done, because it goes totally massless, and now it's just pumping out pure energy. And the way that this could happen, and it's not perpetual motion, right? There's something in the universe called conservation of mass energy, right? So imagine just the vag itself, right, is a closed system. It has to stay at the same energy. Well, if I reduce the mass, Einstein's equations of motion, there's two components. There's E equals mc squared plus pc squared, which pc squared is the mass times the velocity. It's the momentum. So it's the energy of the mass, E equals mc squared, plus the energy of momentum equals the total energy squared. So it's the total energy squared equals mc squared plus pc squared. And so that's the component. Well, if I reduce the mass, right, then the energy of momentum, in order to conserve energy, the energy has to speed up. So as I reduce the mass with this quantum weirdness, right, this quantum effect of reducing the mass, as the mass goes down, forces the energy to go up. And so it's not perpetual motion. It's essentially the opposite of, or no, it's not the opposite. It's essentially decay. It's the mass, decays and the energy goes up. And so, and it's that energy that's going up that we would be using to, power our homes and boil our water and all that kind of stuff. But essentially, if you could reduce the mass of something, you force the universe to give you energy. And so, and all it's doing is it's trading mass for energy. And as it, as you keep the mass, is, kept down, it's got to, keep putting out that energy. And so that's the draw for free, completely clean, infinite energy, if it works.
Well, we are definitely going to have to get together again sometime.
Yeah, man. I just got approved, so I'll keep you posted. I got to finish the proposal and and submit it, and we'll see what's what, man. And then I'm gonna essentially 3D print. I'm gonna make my amp, and I'm gonna rebuild the vag, and it's either gonna sing and go massless almost massless or totally massless. It's either gonna sing or it's not, and if it does, I mean, like, man, sky's the limit, dude. It's gonna be awesome.
You're liable to start a chain reaction at your house.
yeah. If something like blows up, there's like a nuclear like implosion or something. Like, it was probably me.
I think it'll just take off into space.
Yeah.
It'll be sitting on that scale. The scale just like eject it into the atmosphere. Yeah,
pretty much that's what happens.
Yeah.
Well, guys, it is after 11, and I have to go to bed because I have to get up early in the morning. But I enjoy the conversation, and I thank you guys for coming on. And for real though, let's get together again after when you've got some more to report, especially on the progress with the.
And I'll take some videos so you can see it. You know what I mean?
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Like get different angles so we know you're not like putting your finger on the scale or whatever. I'll try to totally.
You know what I want to see? I want to see you put one on a skateboard and turn it sideways, and just see if it goes forward.
Yeah, man.
That's what I want to see.
Dude, yeah. You can play with it, dude. Seriously. Like, I mean, I think we've talked enough about it so that everybody watching could actually build one themselves. I hope that was what I was going for. Trying to demystify it, I don't think it's that complicated. I don't. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'll tell you, the Wright brothers, built the first plane. Man, they didn't have a high school diploma between the two of them. So I'm convinced it's not like, anti-gravity won't be discovered by, crazy equations and blah, blah, blah. It's going to be somebody like one of us who figures it out and does it and builds it. And then all the smart people can come in and try to take credit for it or whatever and try to like say, oh yeah, we were working on this for you, whatever. It's gonna be us. It's gonna be somebody like us.
Some government contractor will come forward and say, by the way, we own the patent.
Somebody will publish a paper at university and
claim
wherever.
The patent.
So
all right, guys. Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate it, and I will see you next time.
See you, man. Thanks.
All right.
See ya.
See you guys.
See you, Alexei.
See ya.
What you are about to see is a real-life story. The accounts have gone into great detail to give each side's version of this, an exclusive one we understand. One of the most talked about